Hello, everyone. This is Tim O'Flaherty. I am currently Research Director of the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance. This meeting is about learning how to review bills for the upcoming legislative session. This is the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance main page here, nhliberty.org. In order to become a bill reviewer, in order to log in and review bills, you will need to be a member. So in case anyone isn't already, you click here to join. Membership is free at a basic level. A full member is only $20 a year. So the NHLA creates a gold standard that is distributed to all the reps on Wednesdays before the session begins. Here's an example of one of the gold standards. You see how it will give a voting recommendation. Yes, full membership is $20 for 2 years, not $20 a year. So that's $10 a year, so that's a bargain. So the Liberty, the gold standard will just say nay on concurrence, nay on ought to pass. A lot of the voting can be a little confusing, so that's the need for a gold standard voting guide. Make sure that everyone has the Liberty argument in front of them before they press the button to vote. Now this guide is then used for creating the Liberty rating, which is a rating of all of the reps based on how they voted on gold standard votes. I'll show you that. Each rep gets a letter grade from A to F, and even some constitutional threats. And this is those that vote against liberty, reward those that vote for liberty. So we need to make sure that this is as widely publicized as possible. But all of this cannot happen until we have reviewed some bills. That way we know what committees to show up for. The bill reviews will be used in the gold standard, at least on a draft of the gold standard. Hello, viewer 3. Is everyone able to communicate and to hear?
No problems here.
Yeah, I can hear you just fine.
Yes, I can hear.
Great. So Mark, did I miss anything in the introduction there, or anything you'd like to add?
No, I think that's good. Let's continue in this.
So let's jump right in with a bill review. Over here in this corner, we have the section where you can bill review system. So the process involves just determining, is it constitutional? Is a bill expanding the size and cost of government? If there are any unintended consequences. You do need, once you're a member, you need to contact us to add your status as a bill reviewer. It's not automatic with membership. Assuming that you have contacted us and you have the bill reviewer status, you can just click on this link right here, unreviewed bills. Now, these bills are all from the 2014 session. We don't have the new bills loaded in. There are about 40 bills that have now become public for the 2015 session, but they're not loaded in this system yet. So you don't need to worry about that. Here's the 2014. You can sort bills by committee. These are all of the bills, about 700 that are not reviewed. If we just were to pick one committee, refresh the list, pick a good one here. Does anyone have any suggestions? How about this one? Relative to forfeiture of items used in connection with a drug offense. That sounds familiar. So we can see the text of the bill here. Let's scroll all the way down to give you an overview. I'll try not to go too fast in case this is going to be a lag on your screen. So after glancing at this, you decide this looks interesting, I'll want to review it. Click here, see this bill's review. This is the read-only copy that will appear first. No one has done any work here, so we can click right here, review this bill. And now we are in the bill review page. If at any time you need to quit, there's this huge button here. By clicking on review this bill, you are reserving this bill for your own time to work on it. So you don't have to worry about someone else coming and doing the work while you're thinking about it. But that also means that no one else can work on it if you decide that you're going to stop and then you just leave the page without clicking quit. That means that that is locked out of our system. So remember to do that if you are decide that you are not interested in continuing with this bill, or you just don't have the time to finish it. Now the first step will be to select a topic. Is this bill related to agriculture and farming, animals, automotives? Right now I can see it's related to drugs. Are there any other suggestions about what other topics this might be under? You guys still there? Property? Where did I see property? So you just hit Control to select multiple options. Drugs still selected, private property selected. You might select judicial. I know that this went to the Judiciary Committee, but so that's good enough. I have a few topics selected. Yeah, someone is having trouble with the audio. This is the number to call if you're having trouble speaking on the computer. Now this summary is pulled directly from the General Court website. And if you need to go to the General Court website, I'll show you how to find that. Let's start at the NHLA main page. And over here, under State Resources, you'll see a link to the General Court website. So what are we looking for? The summary. you can type in HB 1345 in the search field, and it'll come right up. But an even faster way is to simply click right here. That will take you to, or maybe I'm wrong. Where is the, all right, so here we are. The general court docket. This is the general status, actually, of the bill, and then click on the text. This shows you the when it's being introduced into the Judiciary Committee, what the latest status of the bill is, and you can see that this title is just pulled right from that. Relative to forfeiture of items used in connection with a drug offense. So we can put whatever we want here. That seems like a pretty good title. We might want to rename it because there are similar bills. Mark Warden had an asset forfeiture bill this past year as well. And this is a bill that I had sponsored. This is a simpler one, much more narrowly focused, so we might want to indicate something like that.
Tim, I would encourage our reviewers to add something to those titles if they're too generic. In this case, it just says it changes it, but we don't know if it changes it in a good way or a bad way, or makes it harder for police or easier for police. So let's encourage our friends to make it a little bit more descriptive, especially in the simpler bills.
I agree. So, any suggestions on what we should retitle this? I'm trying to get everyone involved here.
So it kind of refreshes slowly as you scroll around it. I don't think I've had a chance to really read any of the text of the bill yet.
Let's start there. I'll try to go more slowly with the scrolling.
Yeah, I think I get about 2 frames per minute, or second maybe.
Okay. All right, so let's just read the bill first and walk through what all this gibberish means. So, House Bill 1345 FN. So every bill is going to have a number. If it starts in the House, it'll be HB. If it starts in the Senate, it'll be SB. The FN on the end means fiscal note. So that means that this is going to have a financial impact to the state. This would mean a reduction, I would think, in revenue that the state is collecting, if you want to call it revenue. Expropriated funds maybe would be more accurate. Again, the summary, the title here, the sponsors, myself and Representative Garcia. The committee that it was referred to is Judiciary. A brief analysis. This bill provides that the state may only initiate forfeiture proceedings for property used in connection with drug offense after the defendant is convicted of a drug offense. The bill also changes the distribution of proceeds from the sale of such forfeited property. So that might be something to put into our title, something that explains that this is going to allow forfeiture of property only after conviction of the defendant. Now, when we're reading the bill, anything that's in bold italics is better, that is added to the current law. If there's A strike through, that's something that's being deleted from current law. Matter which is either A, all new, or B, appealed and reenacted, appeals in regular type. All right. So here's the beginning of the bill. An act relative to forfeiture. Section 1, application of receipts, drug forfeiture funds. Amend RSA 612 to read as follows. So this is redirecting where the money is going. You're striking out the drug forfeiture fund, striking out the state law enforcement agency account, and striking out the Department of Health and Human Services Offices of Alcohol and Drug Abuse Prevention account. And then Section 2, Controlled Drug Act. All right. Now it's adding here to this section, after conviction of defendant for a violation of this chapter. So that's in bold. And then in Section 3 here, Controlled Drug Act. The change here is striking out the balance remaining shall be distributed by the Department of Justice as follows. So currently what they do, they take the first $500,000 and then 10% is deposited into a special non-lapsing account that goes to Health and Human Services. 45% goes into drug forfeiture fund. And then of any remaining balance of that, 10% then goes in a manner prescribed in subparagraph VA. And 90% shall be deposited in 5A3. So it gets kind of complicated. Basically, let's say it's changing it now here to say 90% of the remaining balance shall be deposited into the general fund. 10% shall be deposited into the Department of Health and Human Services and Drug and Alcohol Treatment. There's some other changes here to what happens to this this money. This is the one that's the most important, in my opinion. This other stuff just focused on where this money goes, but things like this here add something to the law that says after conviction of the defendant. And then the effective date down here is going to be at the end, 60 days after its passage. Sometimes it won't be until the beginning of the new year. This is 60 days after its passage. All right, nearing the end. This is the fiscal note. So this is compiled by the actual departments involved. This will be attached to any bill that makes some kind of financial changes. Not all bills have them, but if they do, it'll be useful for our bill review purposes. There will be questions on the bill review about what kind of, if this is going to increase taxes or if this will impoverish citizens to any degree. So this says this bill, as introduced, will increase state general fund revenue, decrease state restricted revenue, decrease county revenue, decrease local revenue, but they can't tell you by how much. No fiscal impact on state, county, or local expenditures. So that's the bill. Does everyone have a general sense of what this bill does? We can move on to actually filling out some of those fields in the bill review section. You guys still with me?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Yes.
We're here.
Mark, did you have anything to add on reading this bill?
One other little note about the fiscal note is that these bills that have fiscal notes have to go to a second committee after they're passed by the House. So all of the things being equal, as we're reviewing the 800 bills, we should look at the ones that have fiscal notes early in the process because they're going to be heard relatively early in the process through the first committees.
Okay, great. Let's see. Instead of relative, why don't we put requiring a conviction before forfeiture of items used in connection with a drug offense. It's a little bit more specific. This is supposed to be a layman's explanation, but it's perfectly acceptable to just leave what's already there. The next question is the bill liberty friendly? And we have an option of anti-liberty, neutral, pro-liberty, or unsure. So why don't you guys tell me what does this seem like to you?
Pro-liberty.
That was certainly my hope. You can never tell with the way the bills are going to go. After you introduce them, the committee can do whatever they want with them. So, and they didn't do much at all with my asset forfeiture bill or Mark Warden's bill. They just killed them mercilessly. Now, what about impact? How strong an impact will this have? Is this going to be a high impact if it passes, average, or low? This is a pretty important field in terms of the ranking that this bill will have after we are finished. A number ranking will be assigned to this bill, either pro-liberty by 20 points, anti-liberty by 5, whatever it may be. This has a large impact on that rating. So we want to make sure to be judicious with this. However, it is somewhat subjective. A low impact could be a small fine, for example, that affects everyone in the state of New Hampshire. Or it could be something that affects only a small number of people, but to a harsh degree. Maybe it shuts down an entire field of business, but that might only be 100 people in the state. But that still seems like it would be a high impact to me. Mark, any other thoughts about the impact or?
Sorry, when we heard committee hearings, the testimony about this practice of civil asset forfeiture, that a lot of people claimed there wasn't that much that was done here in the state. Yes, it's a problem in other places, but the Department of Safety claimed that they don't do a lot of it here. So I would lean towards saying that it's not high impact yet. I don't know what it said in the fiscal note about how many dollars are involved, but I don't think it's as widespread here to qualify as a high impact personally.
If I may,
go ahead.
How do you factor in sort of the notoriety aspect of it, where this isn't something that would make the news in another state, like it wouldn't be a really signal victory for the liberty movement, even though it's like a strong move, in the right direction. It's not as if you eliminated all asset forfeiture. It's sort of a, it's not like decriminalizing marijuana where it's going to be on CNN.
I think you want to kind of avoid taking into account the PR value that this is going to have for the liberty movement. You want to focus on what this is actually going to mean for everyday life in New Hampshire, for the citizens of New Hampshire, or for the state. Is this going to increase the power and the scope of the state? So what impact will the bill actually have? What change will it make in the world? Not so much its PR value. Now, you might be choosing a bill that you're personally interested in. If you specialize in gun rights, or you might have chosen this civil asset forfeiture bill because that's your issue. You're going to be at the State House lobbying for it. You want to kind of be as objective as you can, even though this is, important issue for you. Try to think of it in those broader terms. What impact will it actually have if passed in the state?
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah. Well, Mark said that this would have said low impact. Thankfully, asset forfeiture isn't as widespread as in New Hampshire as it is in other places. So that's great that we can give that a low impact. All right, the next question is, does this bill only seek to create a study committee? A lot of bills are introduced to do just that. You just want to study something, which really just means that in the fall of the legislative year, a bunch of representatives will sit around and discuss a topic. There is, unfortunately, a lot of times bills can be changed into a study committee if the committee doesn't want to completely vote down a bill. They'll just politely send it off to a study committee. Maybe they're genuinely interested. Maybe there's problems with the bill that can only be resolved by further discussion in a committee. And then the committee will recommend whether or not legislation should be pursued in the next year. This bill does not establish a study committee, so we can leave that unchecked. If it was a study committee, you might want to just check this off first thing and then go right down to the end and click submit, because we don't really need to worry so much about study committees. They're not going to affect any change in the law, at least not this year. So we can spend our efforts focusing on those bills that actually have a chance of doing some good or some harm. Now, first question on this section of bullet points: civil rights. Does this bill protect the rights of the people or supplant them with new government-granted privileges? Does it protect rights or demean rights? What do you guys think? I would like to think that this protects rights, personally. This does say here protects the rights of the people. So your right to have secure ownership in your property seems like it would be threatened by this civil asset forfeiture business. So you could say that. What about personal responsibility? Does this bill increase the personal responsibility of individuals, or does it promote protectionism or victimhood? Any thoughts on that? All right, I'll put down increases personal responsibility. How about that?
All right.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Okay. Right to property. It doesn't.
This is a clear one, I think.
Yeah. Now you have to distinguish between what the bill does and what the actual existing law does, because the existing law that is being amended is all about taking someone's property. But this bill would reduce the instances when that happens, so you say it protects private property. Clarity, is this written clearly? Is it honest and clear, or duplicitous or vague? Leaving it NA is also a perfectly acceptable option. Let's go back to the bill and take a look at it. Although it may be confusing, is it duplicitous or vague? There's a lot of business happening with where the money is going, which can be rather confusing.
A lot of what's in the bill is just removing existing statute, which may have been more confusing. And there's no new section to be confusing, so I'd say it's pretty clear.
I think so. All right, honest and clear. Accountability. Does this bill absolve officials and agencies of civic responsibility or hold them liable for abuses? So this is officials and agencies.
It doesn't really seem to directly impact that.
So it doesn't.
That's a good point.
It doesn't really impact their accountability.
It impacts their budgets, but not in a way that would make them more accountable, really.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it might make them more honest, but not directly. It's not.
Well, I would say I can see that point of view, but you could also make the argument that what this is trying to do is attack the whole idea of policing for profit. But that's removing an incentive to do harm rather than holding someone accountable for wrongdoing. So let's just leave that as NA. Constitutionality. Does this bill adhere to the letter of the law established by the New Hampshire Constitution? There is a hyperlink here to the Constitution. So it's definitely worth reading this if you haven't read this document, at least the first part. That's the one that we'll be concerned with mostly when we're doing the bill reviews. That's the Bill of Rights in the New Hampshire Constitution. The second part has to do with the form of government, you know, what the rules are, what the legislature can do, how it's organized, the House, the Senate, the governor, the council, judiciary. So we're mostly concerned with the Bill of Rights.
Tim, looking at part the first of the Constitution, Article number 19 talks about searches and seizures, which is related, similar, I think, to what we have in the U.S. Constitution and, what is it, the Fourth Amendment? So let's see what that says and see if that somehow speaks to this bill.
All right. So Article 19, searches and seizures regulated. Every subject hath a right to be secure from all unreasonable searches and seizures upon his person, his house, papers, and all his possessions. Therefore, all warrants to search suspected places, arrest a person for examination or trial, and prosecutions for criminal matters are contrary to this right, if the cause or foundation of them be not previously supported by oath or affirmation, and if the order in a warrant to a civil officer to make search in suspected places, or to arrest one or suspected persons, or to seize their property be not accompanied with special designation of the persons or objects of search, arrest, or seizure, and no warrant ought to be issued, but in cases and with the formalities prescribed by law. That's a mouthful. So I think that is very relevant to this bill. So currently, assets can be seized, and it is legal. So I don't think that the current law is necessarily unconstitutional. This does make the case here that as long as it has a warrant, that the search and seizure is permitted. What do you think about that, Mark?
I'm not familiar with the implementation of the current statute and how they do it, but it seems to me that under solicited forfeiture, they can take your stuff if they come across it, like on a traffic stop.
Mm-hmm.
I do think it's relevant to the overarching subject matter here. Whether it has a direct application to this bill, I don't know. I'd have to take a closer look at that.
I think
we should use it. I think we should use it to defend this legislation.
I think it's definitely in the spirit of the Constitution to restrict, unreasonable searches and seizures. So, and again, we're talking about the bill, not the current law. So, we want to say that it's constitutionally legal. And then, if you do make a distinction between legal and unconstitutional, do make a note down here in the constitutional notes section. If you don't have something to put down here in constitutional notes, then it's probably better to just leave this bullet as NA. So let's paste this section of the Constitution here to reference. And we can add something like this bill is in the spirit of the Constitution. So we have a nice reference there to the relevant section. And of course, you can just put Article 19 searches and seizures if you're trying to save space. You can always look it up. Enforceability. Is this legislation easily enforceable or arduously burdensome, perhaps unenforceable? So this is telling police or courts what they cannot do. They can't just seize someone's property and try that before the person is found guilty or not guilty. So it seems easily enforceable to me. Does anyone have any differing opinions?
I tend to agree. It's either enforceable or NA. Looking at the bill, it just tweaks what is already the procedure and the statute. I think it gives direction to the courts and police departments, so I think it's fairly enforceable.
Okay. At least as enforceable as the current.
Right. So, regulations and bureaucracy. Does this bill increase or decrease bureaucratic and regulatory infrastructure? This one kind of always gives me trouble, but you have to think about, this is about infrastructure. Is this creating a new department? Is there going to have to be someone hired to administer this section of law? Is there any increase in bureaucracy? Because the bill itself could be seen as to add to the regulations as to what the state can and cannot do, but we're concerned about the infrastructure and bureaucracy.
I'm looking at the bill, and it says that the balance shall be deposited in the general fund and in the Department of HHS Services Office of Alcohol and Drug Abuse Prevention account. So as long as those are existing accounts and departments, there's no new layer of infrastructure. If you were forming a new account or a new office, then that would be a negative thing as far as the review is going. But in this case, I don't think it adds anything new.
Right. That account is existing. Instead of taking that money and also putting that into the general fund, the idea that I had for keeping that in was to better the chances of this bill passing. I felt that a lot of people would be concerned about funding for drug and alcohol treatment, which is already underfunded in their perspective by the state. I would agree that treatment options are underfunded, but should the state be doing that? Well, I don't need to worry about that. By keeping that in there, the chances of this bill were hopefully improved. It does take the money away from these other agencies that receive it directly, but those agencies will remain. They're not dedicated agencies to administer disbursement of this funds, so I don't think that we can really say that it reduces or lessens bureaucracy. So we'll leave that one as an A. Fiscal impact. Is the fiscal impact of the bill on private citizens positive, none, or negative? Positive fiscal impact would be where a bill reduces taxes or costs.
Definitely positive.
So we have positive impacts, low negative impact, considerable negative impact. So since we only have one that's positive, I suppose any measure of positive fiscal impact qualifies for a bullet point here.
Well, can you guys explain to me how it's a positive impact on all the citizens of New Hampshire? Is there a reduction in cost of government that would happen if this were to pass?
Well, I would say that dedicated funding is less efficient. So insofar as earmarked funding for law enforcement is going away in favor of the general fund, that would be more likely to allow overall taxation levels to lower, and for some subset of individuals who are found innocent, they will retain their property, so their cost of government goes down, even if it's not shared across the board.
That's true. Obviously, there'd be a positive impact for anybody who would have had his assets seized otherwise, similar to if you remove a criminal penalty or a fine, then it's going to benefit people who would have been fined otherwise. But I'm questioning whether this is a broad impact. I'm wondering if this actually reduces the cost of government, which would be a positive impact to all the citizens. If it's just taking the money and putting it in one pot instead of another pot, sounds like a wash to me.
I would think that you have some revenue from sales that the government keeps in this case, but some that they would have collected otherwise. So the gross amount collected goes down, the revenues go down. No, I mean, I don't know that it's like administratively more efficient, like they can let a couple accountants go or something, but but the revenue from this source would be reduced. Would it not?
And this is a good example of the kind of objective decisions that we sometimes bring to the reviews, and we can disagree on some things. One person may feel it's one, another feels it's a different answer. So in many cases, there's no absolute right or wrong answer. But it's good to discuss these different options.
Well, so I'm here to learn. I'm sorry. So what you want in this question is you want to know if like government complexity and services and burden as a whole is reduced, not really revenue questions, right?
I would say this is the fiscal impact of the bill on private citizens. So I don't think that this is going to have a huge impact, and I don't know that we want to. I mean, if you are a drug dealer and you are, legitimately like accused of a crime, according to the law, your assets are, available to be seized by whether or not that happens before or after conviction wouldn't change too much. So we're concerned about those people that are wrongly have their property wrongly seized, in which case they would not have their assets seized until after conviction. So I would say that it has a very slight positive impact. And it's definitely debatable. These questions here don't have as much weighting as some of the other sections. So, but if you are uncertain, it'd probably be better to just leave it as none. But I think that you can definitely make an argument that there'd be some positive impact. Like I said, there's no bullet for low positive impact like there is for negative. So if there's any positive impact at all, it'd be worth marking it, in my opinion.
Well,
right.
One other thing we could look at is the fiscal note. And in the fiscal note, it says the changes proposed by this bill will result in the general fund increasing by $55,000 each year, and a decrease in the revolving drug fund of $27,900, and a decrease to law enforcement of $27,900 each year. So that's what they're saying is we just move around the funds from one pot to the other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just reallocating where that money is being directed so as to reduce the incentives that police departments might have to seize drug-related assets for the purposes of, buying themselves new toys and so forth.
If we look at the last part of that fiscal note, it says for the period of fiscal year 2008 through fiscal year 2013, the department has received on average $5,164 each year from drug forfeiture proceedings. So that's very little. That's a very minuscule amount in a $5 or $10 billion budget for state budget, and hundreds of millions, or I should say probably $1 billion for Health and Human Services. So that's one reason we said earlier it was a relatively low impact, and why the fiscal impact is going to be negligible, except for the few people who are busted.
This number, I think, is low. I mean, when you talk about asset forfeiture in general, I think it's much higher than that in New Hampshire. I think this number is so low because what happens most times, police departments will cooperate with the feds when they seize assets. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mark, but that number would be much higher.
That is correct, Tim.
Yeah, so they have, this is concerning itself. This bill is only concerned with when the police initiate and arrest someone just by themselves. If they involve the feds, they get an even higher cut of the revenue, I believe, and that goes directly into their coffers. So that number is higher in New Hampshire, unfortunately. Where are we? Taxation? Does this legislation charge everyone for its costs, or only those who will use it? Now, if it's a fee for users, that's slightly more libertarian than a tax on everyone. Well, it's definitely more libertarian. So a user fee would be something that, well, some people might say the road toll, but to give a less controversial example, there's a program for hikers, a Hike Safe card that you purchase. You are funding the rescue of hikers and the state parks more generally when you purchase that card, and only the people that are using the parks are paying for that. So that can be seen as a user fee. This doesn't have to do with taxation at all, really. So I think we can say an A for that one. All right, so let's move on to pro-liberty talking points, the next field here. Now, this section, I think it would be better to have to put in, instead of pro-liberty talking points, it might be better to think of it as arguments in favor of the bill, arguments against the bill. What we want to do is anticipate what the arguments are going to be when this bill is introduced into committee. And eventually these arguments could also find themselves on the gold standard eventually. So what are some pro-liberty talking points about this bill?
Removes incentive for cops to take property.
Okay. Any other ideas? I think that's pretty good. That's definitely the purpose of the bill here, is to remove policing for profit.
Upholds the tradition that you're innocent until proven guilty.
Okay. Yeah, definitely.
On some bills like this, we will also say that it redirects the energies or the focus of police onto crimes where they're proven victims. I don't know if you guys think this fits here, but anytime you remove a victimless crime, it frees the police up to do things against true harm done to people.
Okay. I agree with that.
It's pretty much going along with Sandy's point.
Now, And you can elaborate on this as much as you want. I mean, please do if you have some long arguments. There's no limit to the space here. Anti-liberty talking points. So try to imagine what those against this bill are going to be saying.
Soft on crime?
Let's see. The police will need the funds to fight drug dealers. How about that?
That's a good one. Maybe something about how this is in keeping with what the feds do, and we're only following directions from on high.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sure there's no shortage of police that would come and testify against this bill and make all kinds of ridiculous arguments like that. But we shouldn't view them as ridiculous. I'll retract that. We have to anticipate their arguments and come up with counterpoints so that we're prepared in the committee. I think that's good enough for right now for the review. Like I said, you want to elaborate on this as much as you feel you're able to. The next question, is this a don't touch issue for the NHLA? We'll create a hyperlink here that goes to a page that says just what those are. There aren't many don't touch issues. Abortion is one. Currently, also the death penalty is a don't touch issue. So the NHLA had a poll of the database, I suppose, and we just decided this was too controversial. We are an alliance of those who advocate liberty, and we couldn't come to any kind of consensus on this. This would drive away more people than it was worthwhile. So we don't need to be, take a position on this in order to keep our alliance together. We decided not to. Report card candidate. The report card that it's referring to, I showed earlier, it's the annual ranking of each legislator. So if we wanted this to be on that ranking, if we wanted this to go into determining what the candidates, what the representatives' letter grade is, we would put this here so that we include that. And any NHLA member, I'm sorry, go ahead.
This is Mark. I think this is a good bill, and asset forfeiture has really been at the forefront of a lot of our discussions lately, and we had a guest speaker at the last Liberty dinner. So I would check this one.
Great. And then if it's interesting, I don't know how much we use this. You might want to say it's interesting if you have a lot of questions about this bill. Need someone else to follow this. You can mark flagged as interesting. And then for review notes, one of the things that we can put here are questions. If there was some ambiguity about the bill, if we had trouble with the fiscal impact, for example, we might want to make a note about what our thought process was when we made the rankings that we did. So you can put that in here. Anything that might be relevant, some interesting information that you came across along the way as you were researching this might also be relevant. If you know some of the background of the sponsors, their motivations for introducing the bill, just what they're trying to get at, you might put that here. Also, it is possible to re-review a bill. So if you were doing that, if you were logging into a bill that's already reviewed, you'd want to make a note that says something like that you reviewed it at this time and here are the changes that you made. at so what is today's date? 4th. So I'll put my name here. Up here it shows once we've submitted this, it'll show you the name of the person that reviewed it, I believe. All right. Any questions so far? We can go ahead and submit it and see what happens from there. No questions? Let's see what happens. Click on submit. So it says that the review has been submitted. In order to find out what the score is, you want to go to reviewed bills. We're still in judiciary here. And then here we see the bill that we were working on, relative to forfeiture used in a drug offense. It keeps that same title. It has given it a score of 4.2, positive, green. And we can click here to look at the read-only version and see that all of our information is now in here. And like I said, if you wanted to re-review it, it is possible to just go in again and click on that and re-review it. And it does say here my name. So, I think that covers the review process. It might be useful to go into some of the resources that you can draw upon to complete the review. Mark, did you have anything to add at this point about the review process? Maybe if you wanted to walk us through what some of the resources are. I can pass over control to you, I believe.
Sure, we can talk about some of the links on the main website and these resources that are at hand there. I use this quite a bit, and hats off to whoever originally laid out this website with all these helpful hints and helpful links. Particularly the House calendar. Did we go over that yet?
I don't believe so.
I use the links to the House calendar and to the RSAs quite a bit.
Okay. Would you want to try to take control? I'd like to try out this feature, see if it is possible. I don't know which viewer you are. Do you know?
I don't either. I tried to rename myself. I don't know if I'm 7 or... I'll write something right now.
Mark, you can rename yourself by clicking on the button that has a person with the person button. It's the third one. And then mouse over whichever viewer you are. And to the right, you'll see an option, change my name.
Well, while Mark is trying to figure that out, we can...
I have a question about re-reviewing bills.
Yes, please.
So the review you just did, it came up with a score of 4.2 or something like that. So is there anything to prevent another bill reviewer from coming along and just redoing the review in a very different way and coming up with a different score? Are the scores averaged, or does a second review wipe out the first review?
No, I don't believe that they are average. I think that the latest review is the one that will be wiping out the other one, so to speak. I do believe that there is some kind of record in the website database. You're the expert on that, Sandy, I guess, but it wouldn't be easily accessible to any of the bill reviewers to see what the previous comments were if someone goes and writes over that file.
Okay.
Yeah, that's unfortunate, but if someone had some kind of malicious intent, we would still be able to restore the data based on what's in the database, I believe. If that's the concern. So I don't see Mark on my list here. So let's just go ahead and find a calendar like you suggested. Well,
one of the things I'll like to add right now is that I see Joe LaChance is on this call, or at least he was for a while there. He's my state representative here in Manchester. And well, this is good practice because when we look at these bills, well, things we're looking for are, for example, number one, is it constitutional? Number two, is there a demonstrated need for this new legislation? Number three, how much does it cost? And number four, is it enforceable? So these are all good things for representatives to keep in mind as they are reviewing bills in their committees. And as Joe will find out, often some of the representatives don't even bother to think those things through. They just sort of look at things prima facie and say, oh, it sounds good, let's pass it, without giving it more thought. So glad to see
Exactly.
Joe.
I'm still on, and I agree with you.
One of the things that Tim and I are going to talk about now when you look at the House calendars, the reason for that is that we have 800 bills to review, 800 plus, and we don't know at this time how to prioritize them because when all the bills are released, they don't tell us when they are going to be heard in committee. Generally, we don't find out until about a week beforehand. So each week, we being the volunteers and the bill reviewers, should monitor the House calendar to see what's coming up next week to be heard in committee, and then look at those bills and to see which ones haven't been reviewed. And that's how we're going to prioritize our efforts.
Well, why don't you lead the discussion of the resources, Mark, and I'll click on the links here. So over here in this section is the calendar and journals link.
And because we don't have the committee hearings set up for 2015 yet, we're going to refer to a 2014 session calendar, just to give you an idea. But eventually it'll be right here on the main page. Let's go to something early in the year under the calendars, such as end of January or first week in February, either one of those, Tim.
All right.
For those of you who are new to this, the calendar is published virtually online as well as in a hard copy format by the House clerk each week on Thursday. And it has a number of things in it. It has announcements to the House members as well as to the public. It also lists all the bills that are going to be heard the following Wednesday and voted on by the full House in chambers. That's when all 400 people get together and vote on bills that have been reported out of their committees. So that's one part of the House calendar. In this discussion, what we're interested in is seeing the upcoming committee hearings. So as he scrolls through here, we see some notices. We see a reminder of the deadlines. Consent calendar is bills that will be voted on the next Wednesday. All of the consent calendar bills are voted on en masse, or all of them together, up or down, generally because they were unanimous out of the committee. Then we'll see the, what's it called, regular bills, not consent calendar. There'll be a regular calendar listed by committee alphabetically. So we see here on February 12th, the House will hear all these bills, 1486, and 1624 from Children and Family Law. And some will be voted on voice vote, some will be roll calls, some will be division votes, some will have debates, and some won't. But again, by the time it gets to this point, we should have already had the bill review done and spoken with our committee member friends. So we're going to keep going down through the calendar to see what's coming up next week and try to head those bills off at the pass. This is such a long one. It had part 1 and part 2. That was a long day. Okay, now we're getting to the committee hearings for next week. Typically, these are the very first times that the bills are being heard in committee. So if you're a bill reviewer and you're following, let's stop right there. Let's say you like commerce bills. You like the nano brew bills and liquor and alcohol things and business taxes and insurance. Those are all in commerce. We're looking here to see what's coming up next week in commerce. We see that there are 1, 2, 3 bills, 1614, 1242, and 1281. The others that are listed below, executive session. That means that it's already been heard, and now they're voting on it as a committee, up or down. Then we see subcommittee work session, 1283, which means that one's already been heard the first time, and now they're breaking into a subcommittee to give it more attention. So I'm worried about these 3 right here, 1614, 1242-FN, and 1281-FN. Those can be heard next Tuesday. So if these bills haven't been reviewed by our system yet, maybe one of us reviewers wants to jump in there and get it done. And if we see that it's a really bad bill or a really good bill, then we can shoot off a note on Facebook or maybe to the committee or maybe even better to our direct friendly contacts on a committee like Laura Jones and give her a heads up that there's a really scary bill coming up. Any questions on that? So this is a way to help us prioritize when to review the 800 bills. We want to, as they come into the House each week, we'll want to jump on those to head them off the pass. And you'll see here how a lot of these are the FN bills. As I mentioned earlier, if it has a fiscal note, it gets put to the front of the line because if it passes the House on the first time through, it goes to a secondary committee, either Ways and Means or Finance, because there is a fiscal impact.
Did you want to go to the General Court website and see how to search for one of these bills? I think I might have alluded to this before. Normally you could just type in the bill number here. You just type in HB 1614, but this is going to search 2015 bills. So that's not going to work. Normally it would. Right now what we'll have to do is type in 2014 and here we have the docket for this one. Do you want to walk through what all this means, Mark?
Sure. This is how you can look at the history and the status of an existing bill working its way through the House and Senate, all the way from when it's first released early in January, all the way through to May or June if it makes its way through the Senate and gets signed or vetoed by the governor. By the way, about 2/3 or 3/4 of all bills originate in the House, and just the small portion originates in the Senate. So typically we spend more time on House bills, although you can do whatever you want as a reviewer. So the first thing I do when I look at a bill is I want to see what the text is. I want to read it and see who the sponsors are. And we saw it earlier, but just on the upper right-hand corner, you can see the text, either HTML or PDF format. Just click on PDF for us, either one. and we will see this one is sponsored by Schlockman, so note to self, it's probably bad, with co-sponsors Kermit Williams and Senator Susie. Then it says, bill requires health benefit plans issuing pharmacy benefit cards to include the insurance department's consumer hotline phone number. Great. So it's a new requirement on a State Department. If it were on the general public or a requirement on businesses, we wouldn't like it. This one's adding a layer of bureaucracy on the bureaucrats. Probably not terrible, but it's still just one more thing they have to do, and they have to change all their labels and change their website stuff.
But we probably wouldn't be putting this one on the gold standard.
You're right. This is not going to make it on gold standard. Okay, then you would have to see, if we look at the docket here to see what these things mean. We can see it was introduced on 12/19. That means that it was a holdover from the previous year, because they usually just get introduced in January. So I'm guessing this was held over for interim study the previous year. Refer to Commerce, and then on January 29th, it has first public hearing. And typically, the committee doesn't make any action on that. They don't vote it up or down. They usually do that a different day. We see on the next line on February 18th, executive session. That means the committee decides whether to support or oppose a bill. And they didn't finish. They recessed the committee before they decided on that bill. Perhaps something went wrong beforehand, or perhaps there was a snowstorm coming. So they continued it on the 20th, and they issued a committee report on the 20th of inexpedient to legislate, which means they didn't like the bill. In fact, they voted unanimously to kill the bill. Inexpedient to legislate means it's a recommendation to not pass the bill. The opposite of inexpedient to legislate is ought to pass. And then there's a hyperlink to House Calendar 14, which is just a permanent record of that bill. Okay, so even though it got killed in committee, it still goes to the full House. And that's the beauty of New Hampshire legislative process, is that it's very transparent. In other states, it just dies if a committee kills it, but not here. So on March 12th, it being this bill was heard and voted on by the entire House. That was on a Wednesday. And the MA, you can see the result was inexpedient to legislate, which is the bill died. And that's why it's the last on this list. MA means motion adopted. The motion is what came out of the committee. The committee recommendation was inexpedient to legislate. That was the motion on the floor. Then MA means that motion was adopted by a voice vote, VV. The alternatives to a voice vote are a division vote and a roll call.
Here's some extra abbreviations in case you come across something that you don't understand. What about searching the RSAs, Mark?
Let's pick any bill. Let's look at 1345, that's fine, because this is a drug bill. Click on, oh yeah.
You want to go through here?
No, let's look at that bill you were just going to 1345. For last year. Let's look at the bill text. This bill we were just reviewing has some changes to RSA 318, which, if memory serves, is Controlled Drug Act, but we want to see what that whole chapter is about. And we see here in number 3, amend RSA 318-B 17B Roman 5. So let's copy all that. The RSA number, just the number, not the RSA.
Okay.
So we want to now review the statutes. Go to the home page of nhliberty.org, if you will, and there's a link to statutes on the right-hand column. Oh, by the way, RSA stands for Revised Statutes Annotated. Basically, it's the law of the land. It's all the laws on the books. This is the general court's way to search the statutes. You can either browse by title and chapter and words, or you just search. If you know the number, as we do now, we can search it directly. So this is a good link to use when you are reviewing individual bills. Then in this, we're going to paste it there. We could have just done 318 or 318-B, but if we know it this specifically, let's go ahead and try this and hit enter or search. Well, before you click on this, we see it brings back a number of results. This first one will give us the entire Controlled Drug Act, and then number 3 is more specific. It talks about forfeiture used in connection with drug offenses. So pick one, and this just shows us how we cross-reference a bill with the existing statutes. Often you can go back and forth between these two functions quite a bit. And remember, the bill referred to Roman numeral 5. So somewhere down here is Roman V or 5 that is being amended or abridged in the bill.
And here's where we were reading before. There is a great website that also might be worth mentioning, called gencourt.org. We do the same thing here. We'll find just the same results, except now when something is referenced, this line here references this bill. It has a hyperlink, so we can just go right to that. So that's another extra tool that we can use. Sorry, Mark, go ahead.
Tim and Sandy, after a bill is reviewed and we get the score, what's the next step? What does NHLA do? What do its volunteers do to now take that information, that rating, and I guess inform the public or the legislature?
Well, we'll use a lot of that information in the gold standard eventually. Once it has a rating, there is a system on here to notify us when a bill that has been rated will be coming up for a vote. So in case we miss it by reading the calendar, this is another reason why we should rate the bills. It has this awesome public hearing notice. Did you have anything to add to that, Sandy?
Nope.
I believe there's a way to set up alerts so that when bills are reviewed by a certain committee, you get an email. This would be super helpful to Joe and others who are liberty-friendly reps sitting on the committees, so that they can find out when a bill has been reviewed that's coming to their committee, particularly if it's really bad, they would get a heads up on that. And I could see the value to the busy representatives in having a sort of a second set of eyes look at these through the Liberty filter. Joe, what do you think about that?
I think that's a great idea. The more eyes, the better. The more ideas, the better.
Mark, I haven't received any instruction in how any alert functionality works, but I can research that for you.
That'd be great, Sandy. We haven't utilized it.
I don't know about it.
Yeah, we've underutilized it in the past, but I signed up for it when I was sitting on the Criminal Justice Committee, and I found it very helpful, particularly now because we're going to have a lot of bill reviews done this year. Well, what the way to use it is to get some of the representatives to sign up for alerts, or with their consent, we can sign them up for them. And then they would just get an email when a bill in their committee has been reviewed. And they wouldn't even have to open that email. They could just look and say, hey, this is a positive number 2 or a 0. They're not going to worry about it. But if they see a negative 25 rating, they can say, hey, what's up with this? And then they're just a little bit better prepared for the next week when that comes up for a public hearing.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe a good bill reviewer, like the people on this call, has put in there some of the pro-liberty or anti-liberty talking points. And now Joe is well positioned to ask some really insightful questions to the people giving testimony.
I like it. Just having that subject line alert you with all the amount of emails that come in or alerts that come in or whatever, just to have that, I think would be extremely helpful. Hey, by the way, next week this is coming. Make sure you look at this.
Right.
So I think that we've covered most of the basics. Just to reiterate that if you're interested in reviewing bills, sign up for the NHLA as a basic member at the very least. But please, full membership, the funds will go to supporting Liberty candidates in 2 years. So please sign up as full or lifetime members. I'm sure Sandy would agree with that. She's our membership director. Let us know you want to be bill reviewer. We'll set you up with that. And I should make a brief mention that although we have this bill review system on the website here, in the future we may be using a different system we call Advocate. So this is not fully functional yet, but for bill reviewers, what you need to know is that the bill review process will be the same or almost identical to the process that we've just walked through. So contact us if you're interested in reviewing bills, and we'll get you set up with that account. Did you have anything to add, Mark or Sandy?
No.
No, I think it's been great. We really appreciate the people on the call going through this and encourage them to do many more bill reviews. It gets easier each time you do it, and you get a better feel for the relative importance or impact of each bill compared to others. So even though this is a little bit slow going through it the first time, it does get faster and easier.
Yeah. Does anyone have any questions? If you can't use the audio, if you can't speak, there's a chat room function. I'll give you the last chance to chime in with any questions.
This is Joe. I just wanted to thank you. I appreciate the training. Appreciate the folks that are on here as well.
Great, thank you. Well, we look forward to working with you in the legislature.
Thank you.
This is Marie. Thank you for your time. It's been interesting to see what you've been involved with.
Thank you for attending. And we'll be holding more bill review sessions. If you want to try your hand at some of the bills that are in the system for 2014 to get some practice, feel free to go ahead and do that. And like I said, we'll have bills for 2015 in the next few weeks coming up. So get some practice in on the 2014 bills. And if you have any questions, contact me at research@nhliberty.org. There's a link on the website to contact us as well. So with that, I guess we'll call this meeting adjourned. This is very useful forum, so hopefully it worked well for everyone. We'll get some feedback on how the system worked, and hopefully we can do this again.
Thank you.